Okay, we are going to be looking at solving quadratics and doing some different kinds of factoring and finding the roots of the quadratics, okay? First of all, we are going to look at what we can factor out of this very first problem, okay? So you can see that all of these terms have at least an x squared in them, so I am going to factor out an x squared. And then x squared, if I kind of think about distributing this through, x squared times what would have to give me x to the fourth, and that would be x squared. X squared times what would give me 7x cubed, and that would be 7x. And then x squared times what would give me 12x squared, and that of course would be 12. Okay? And then what I hope happens is that what's in here, right here, I will be able to undo the FOIL on, or to factor that trinomial, whatever your previous teachers maybe called it. Remember, these two terms right here have to multiply to make your first. So x times x, of course, makes x squared. And then the two backs right here have to multiply to make 12. So that could be 2 and 6. It could be 3 and 4. It could be 1 and 12. It's positive at the end here. And so you're either going to need to have plus plus in there or minus minus. And of course, because it's positive right here, we know it'll be plus plus. I'm going to put 3 and 4 in here. And now if you check your outsides, you have 4x, and your insides, you have 3x, and 4x plus 3x combines to make that middle term of 7x. And so that's how this factors. And then once you get there, of course, you're going to set each part of that equal to 0. So I'm going to set x squared equal to 0. I will set x plus 3 equal to 0, and I will set x plus 4 equal to 0. And solve. So here, of course, x equals 0, and because this is squared right here, it's x equals 0, but it's actually a double root because it's squared. Okay? Here I subtract 3, and of course I get x equals negative 3. Here I subtract 4, and of course I get x equals negative 4. Notice that this equation had degree of 4. The highest exponent was a 4, and so you should have 4 answers. So here's 1, 2, and then a double root makes 3, 4. Okay, so 4 answers. All right, and here's another one. Okay, so again, these all have at least an x cubed in them, so I will factor out an x cubed. And then again, x cubed times what makes x to the fifth, and that would be x squared. X cubed times what makes 11x to the fourth, and that would be 11x. And then x cubed times what makes 24x to the third, and that would be positive 24. Okay, again, don't forget about this piece, bring it down, and then I can undo the FOIL here. So I will make myself 2 parentheses. My 2 fronts have to make x squared. So x times x makes x squared. My 2 backs have to make 24 back here. Could be 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 6 and 4. And so I want them to add up to make 11, so I will put 3 and 8 right there. Plus plus, because it's plus at the end and plus in the middle. Okay, so again, you'll have x cubed equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, and x plus 8 equals 0. And by the way, I should put equals 0 right here. Okay, so here, of course, x will be 0. Because you have an exponent of 3, that would mean you have a triple root, which counts as 3 answers, basically. And then here, of course, x equals negative 3. And here, of course, x equals negative 8. So I have 5 answers with a degree of 5. All right, here I can factor out an x cubed. Okay, so if I factor out an x cubed, then x cubed times x squared makes x to the fifth, and times negative 196 makes negative 196x cubed. Okay, here I have x cubed. I can't do anything here. And actually, I'm just going to set that equal to 0. This I could factor a couple of different ways. It is a perfect square, so I could deal with it as x times x makes x squared. 14 times 14 makes 196, a positive and a negative in here because this is really plus 0x in the middle. So when you check your outsides, you have negative 14x, and when you check your insides, you have positive 14x, which of course adds to make 0. So you could factor it that way if you wanted. And if you did it that way, of course, you'd go x plus 14 equals 0, x minus 14 equals 0. So of course, x equals negative 14 here. and positive 14 here. And then right here, of course, you have x equals 0, and it's because it's cubed, it will be triple root. Okay, the other thing you could have done, just so you know, right here, is I could have gone x squared minus 196 equals 0, added the 196 over so that I have this, and then take the square root. And when you take the square root, don't forget that you need to have a plus or a minus in there. So you would have positive or negative square root of 196, which of course would be positive or negative 14, and you'd end up at the same place. All right, here we are going to factor a y out of here. Okay, and when I factor a y out of here, then I have y to the 4th minus 144. This, of course, is a perfect square. I can't take the 4th root of something and get 4 answers, so you do need to factor this one as a perfect square. So this is y squared times y squared makes y to the 4th, and then 144 is 12 times 12. And of course you have like that 0y in the middle, so you'll have 1 plus and 1 minus. Okay, so here you will have y equals 0. There's an answer. Here you'll have y squared. I think I can skip this step for you, but I'll show it. Y squared plus 12 equals 0. So of course y squared equals negative 12. And then y would be plus or minus, don't forget your plus or minus, the square root of negative 12. Okay? So first of all, we've got a couple deals in there. You cannot take the square root of a negative number, so you need an I in there. And then of course 12 breaks down into 4 and 3. So this becomes I times the square root of 12, plus or minus, which of course is 4 times 3. The square root of 4 is 2, so you need to pull that out of there. So plus or minus 2i root 3. And there's actually two answers in there. Positive 2i root 3 and negative 2i root 3. Okay? And then up here, y squared minus 12 equals 0. So y squared equals 12. So y is positive or negative root 12, which of course we know is 4 times 3. And again, the square root of 4 is 2. So positive or negative 2 root 3. Okay, so that's what that should look like. Just out of curiosity, if you want to know, this is kind of the graph of that, and it's sort of running off the screen so you can't really see it, but that's what that would look like. All right, then this one's a little bit different. I'm going to move that 13x squared back here. So I have x to the 4th minus 13x squared plus 36, oops, equals 0. Okay, this you can actually factor as a trinomial, but it does factor a little bit differently. So your two fronts right here have to make x to the 4th. So that's just going to be x squared and x squared, okay? And then your two backs right here have to multiply to make 36, which could be 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 6 and 6, 9 and 4. All of those would work. Okay, you are going to use 9 and 4 right here because they will add to make 13. Okay, I have a plus in the back here, but I have a minus in the middle. If it's a plus in the back, of course it either needs to be plus, plus, or minus, minus. Hint, 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 because of this minus, it'll be minus and minus. So I have x squared minus 9 equals 0. And when it's squared, you can either handle it this way. I'll do this one this way. So I have x and 3 and 3, 1 plus, 1 minus. Here I will have x equals negative 3. Here I will have x equals positive 3. Okay, so that's one way you could do that. Or if it's a perfect square, of course you can handle it like this. Move the 4 to the other side, and then square root. And of course we know that the square root of 4 is either positive or negative 2. So you can handle it that way as well. All right, one more problem. And that would be this one right here. Very similar to the last one. Okay, you are going to factor this as a trinomial as well. And again, your two fronts have to make x to the 4th. So x squared times x squared makes x to the 4th. Your two backs have to multiply to make 12. And again, it could be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. You want it to add up to 1 in the middle right here. So you'll use 3 and 4. It's a negative at the end, so it'll either be plus plus or plus minus or minus plus. You want to end up with a positive x squared, so you want your bigger number to be positive and your smaller number to be negative. Okay? And so then, these are not perfect squares. Okay? So I can't do that, but I can factor it like this then. X squared minus 3 equals 0. And so x squared equals 3. And x then would be positive or negative square root of 3. So there's two answers right there. Okay. And then this one, x squared plus 4 equals 0. So x squared will be negative 4. So x will be positive or negative square root of negative 4, which of course will be 2i. Because a negative is under the square root, you need to make sure you have that imaginary number or that I with it. Okay? And I think that should do it.